Welcome to The Winning Formula, a presentation by Christine Egan, Joe Sanders, and Lavender Zhang. The movie industry is pretty crowded right now, but with the expansion of movie consumptions through streaming services, now's actually the perfect time to get into the movie industry. That being said, you might be wondering, what's the best way to break in? And the answer is the winning formula. First of all, you have a foundation built on low-risk, low-reward films. By putting out several films with modest budgets that are more likely to turn a profit, the company will have a solid foundation to build upon. On the other side of things, you have a few marquee tentpole projects that are high risk and high reward. By focusing on a few of these high-budget films that have high grosses, you can earn both massive revenue as well as massive acclaim. Let's start with the latter of these categories, our go big or go home, high risk, high reward projects. The major cons here are that budgets have to be really carefully managed to avoid profit erosion and are typically more complex to mass produce. That being said, the pro is a really big pro, and that's even though they have smaller profit margins, their massive gross dollar amounts mean that even a small margin has really big dollar amounts getting deposited in the bank. What movies get classified as high risk and high reward? Well, typically these are action, adventure, and musical films. Here on this heat map, you'll see very clearly that action, adventure, and musicals have both the highest revenue as well as the highest profit on a consistent basis across the last decade. So where should we invest now that we know that these are our high risk, high reward categories? Well, first of all, live action animation hybrid films like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Sonic the Hedgehog, as well as animated musicals like Frozen, Moana, and Tangled. On this box and whisker plot, you'll see that animation live action hybrid films have a really wide range of profitability, but the high is incredibly high, and they almost always turn a profit. On the other side of the graph, you'll see that anime and musicals have a smaller range of profitability overall, but they consistently turn massively high profit, even on their low end. So who's the strategy leader in this category right now? Well, it's probably not a surprise that it's Walt Disney and its subsidiaries. Disney has shown that they know how to turn each of their films into high profit ventures by focusing on high risk and high reward movies and putting them out less regularly. Meanwhile, other houses like Universal and Fox Searchlight demonstrate great investment efficiency. Here we can see Walt Disney's average net profits by revenue by genre. You can see that in both revenues and profits that Disney produces on both action films and musicals are disproportionate to their other genres. Now let's take a look at our other main category, the slow and steady, low risk, low return films. The pros here are that they are easy to produce and they have less upfront cost. The cons, however, is that these films are more likely to flop and thus not achieve a return on investment. Here, it's important to identify what we mean by flop. This means that a film is either not profitable or that the return on investment does not justify its resource allocation. It doesn't matter if you make $10 million on a film if it costs you $1 billion to produce. So what gets classified here, and how should we invest? Well, comedy and its subtypes like romantic comedy and black comedy, as well as drama, horror, suspense, and thriller tend to fall into this category. On this box and whisker plot, you'll see that these genres typically produce small but predictable net profits, averaging around $50 million per film. Black comedies and romantic comedies especially have very low risk for flopping. As the foundation of the business, the best way to ensure profitability is select project within these 4 low-risk genres. As we'll see on our next slide, you want to keep budgets under $25 million to maximize ROI and under $75 million to reduce the risk of it becoming a flop. And you want to reduce the complexity to manage budget and increase volume. Here, we can see that by comparing budget to ROI, shows that ROI follows a roughly logarithmic pattern with a majority of films in the elbow of the logarithm. This means that a low-budget film is more consistent in its ability to produce a high ROI, and that once a budget crosses $25 million, it produces a pretty unregular ROI. And for that matter, once it crosses $75 million, you enter a danger zone where you actually enter a greater likelihood of having a flop. Meanwhile, when we compare budgets to net profit, we show that profit becomes less predictable as budget increases. So who's the strategy leader in this category? Well, that'd be Warner Brothers and its subsidiaries, Alloy, DC, and Turner Entertainment. Here, we'll see that these genres produce small but predictable returns for Warner Brothers, and especially that their black comedies and romantic comedies tend to have a really wide and predictable range of profitability overall. Looking here at the comedy section in particular, producing an average of 35 films, they're consistently putting out really high returns. So there's actually an example of proven success of what the winning formula can look like, however. And that is Universal Pictures and its subsidiaries, DreamWorks Animation, Working Title Films, and NBC Universal Entertainment. Their portfolio breakdown is approximately 35% high-risk films and about 60% low-risk films. Everything else falls in categories such as live concerts and documentaries. When we take a look at Universal, we can see that approximately 60% of their films is producing 38% of their profit. And 35% of their films, those high-risk ones, are producing 62% of their profit. Now, we don't have it all worked out. There is some future work. We do need to take a look at award-worthiness. Does it make sense to go after the major awards? Does that include, is there a high ROI there? And do they tend to turn a greater profit overall? What is the best way to leverage the international market? Is there ever a justification to only release domestically? And are there opportunities for joint ventures with international firms, similar to what Netflix has done as it's entered the market? And finally, how do successful film houses pivot to television? We know that they almost universally do, so should we consider a separate television division? And does it actually make more sense to start with TV or with film? That being said, what we know is that by following Universal's model and going for a mix of high risk, high reward and strong and steady, low risk, low reward films, that is going to be your formula to success. Thank you and have a fantastic day.